co-host. Let's see what's going on now. Mhm.
Everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, at this time, I'm going to do a roll call of all the participants that are registered for the 2024 Bonding Education Program. Excellent Trucking,
I'm here, Vontina. Thank you.
thank you. Wood Mechanical. Wood Mechanical. I have Boss Entities Construction LLC.
Yes, here, Lemedio Malone.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Woods Trucking LLC. Dr. Woods Trucking LLC.
Okay, I just unmuted.
Who is that?
Dr. Woods Trucking LLC.
No, that was Anthony Wooten
Right.
that's letting you know he's here.
Oh, I see Mr. Wood too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woods. K&J Express.
Yes, I'm
LLC.
here.
Thank
I'm
you,
here.
sir. Thank you. Property Enterprises Incorporated.
Speaker.
Repeat that.
The speakers and
Property Enterprise
I-
Incorporated.
Patterson Enterprises Incorporated. Is that it?
Building Construction Management.
Brandy Aiden is here along with Madison Faust, who is a part-time associate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Brandy. HTL Construction. HTL Construction. The Financial Center. The Financial Center. The Cleaning Leaders LLC.
The audio.
I'm sorry, the Cleaning Leaders LLC. Perry,
Miss Sandra. I spoke
Perry
with her
Pavement
earlier.
Company.
Could you repeat that?
Perry Pavement Company. A1 Electrical Contractors.
Frazier, present.
Thank you, sir. Grind City Transportation.
Present.
Thank you, sir. Jones Capital Investment Group. Jones Capital Investment Group. Patterson Enterprises Incorporated.
Here.
Thank you, sir. And Harris and Associates.
I'm here.
Thank you, sir. All right, just a small couple of housekeeping rules this evening. Please have your camera on and your mics muted. Please have your cameras on and your mic muted. All questions will be monitored by the chat. So if you do have a question, just place it in the chat, and we're going to be monitoring the chat. So we will ascertain your questions a little later at the end. Also, yes.
Before you get started, I have a question. I was trying to assist with the roll call, and I was trying to make sure that everyone on had an opportunity. There's someone, Carol. There's Carol. Carol, what is she still here? I don't see her. I didn't hear her say what company she was with, but I don't see her anymore, so I guess she dropped off.
Rosella, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry, you all. This is Tony Wooten with Wooten Mechanical. She was trying to assist me with getting in.
Okay,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay,
Thank
yes.
you, Tony.
Thank
And
you,
then
Mr.
there's-
Wooten.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. So there's somebody 770-652-9531. They're calling in.
I
I
don't,
spoke with one company here in Atlanta who would be,
There's no name.
okay, let's see.
If your phone number is 770-652-9531, please state your name, the name of your company.
That's number 13. That is,
It's Gianni.
Property
Can you hear me?
Enterprises. Yes, I hear you.
Yes, it's Property Enterprises.
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
thank you, thank you.
And then there's a 242-2112.
I don't know what that is.
Sir, with the boss shirt that says boss.
Oh,
I
that
think-
may be,
Yes, ma'am.
What's the name of your company?
Boss Energy Construction.
Okay, boss.
Yes, I have him I have him. checked
Okay.
in.
And then Lamont Harris.
yes.
Harrison Associates, yes.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Joselle. Going back a small housekeeping rules, please keep your cameras on and your mic muted. We will be monitoring the chat and ascertain any questions at the end of this presentation. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our presenter tonight, which is Mr. Thomas Wilson. He will be presenting on OSHA safety. And Mr. Thomas, take it away. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Let me share my screen again. Our stakeholders are, Cedric, you would like to name our stakeholders?
The stakeholders we have for this great outstanding 2024 Memphis BEP program, we have MAMCA, we have MATA, we have Memphis Shelby County City Schools, we have BBA, which is the Black Business Association of Memphis, we have Shelby County Government, we have Memphis Shelby County Airport Authority, we have TDOT, the Department of Transportation, we have Turner, we have Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, we have MATA, and we have, last but not least, the Tennessee MBA Business Center and MMBC Continuum. And I can't forget the Department of Transportation.
Tennessee, yeah,
Tennessee.
yes,
Thank you, Beth.
okay. The participants, you guys, this is the expectation. We have to have everyone's SBTRC client intake form completed. And class participation is 100%. You're allowed to miss 2 classes. Someone can attend for you, or if no one attend, you can make them up by viewing the video and doing the homework assignment. Homework assignment has to be sent in within 48 hours to Mr. Cedric Hamilton. We'll provide you with his contact information. At the end of the program, there's a final survey. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is the prescriptive plans, which is one-on-one counseling session. When we go through the whole program, we will ask you guys to rank your top 5 areas in which you think you need more assistance. And if there's enough people in one particular area, we may have one group webinar. But other than that, we'll have individual counseling session with the facilitators. And that's the prescriptive plan, phase 2. Our presenter is Mr. Thomas J. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, do you want to give your bio, or you want me to read it? Are you there? Thomas,
I'm here.
do you want to talk about yourself?
So yeah, I can talk about myself. So I'm the managing director of
Speak a
Ella-vation.
little louder.
So I'm the managing director of Ella-vation LLC, and I've been in the safety business for well over 20 years. One of my most recent assignment is the capital improvement project at Archfield Jackson, Atlanta. And during that time, we were ranked #1 for the last 10 years that I was there from a health and safety standpoint, and then bringing in small businesses and helping them improve their profile from a risk and safety perspective in order to make sure that they were more viable and could grow their business. I'm a graduate of Florida State University with a degree in civil engineering. You know, I've also worked for a number of Fortune 500 companies, making sure that they've been able to evaluate their safety program and avoid many fines and also enhance their profile. Again, I'm part of ASCE. I'm also a part of BICE, which is Blacks in Safety Engineering. And again, I'm also a member of AMAC as well, our Southeast Division, and we just had our inaugural chapter down here in Atlanta. So again, that's a little bit about me and what I want to do in this during this course is to make sure that, hey, you know, you guys understand some of the basic tenets, you know, of having a robust health and safety program, how it can go forth to make sure that you not only do you have, you know, not only do you have safe employees, but make sure that you can go forth and make and adhere to all of the, I guess, the demands that your company and job may have going forth. And then again, make sure that you understand some of the insurance costs that's associated with having a robust program, and then fines and stuff and how they can ultimately affect you and lead your business in the wrong direction if not managed. You'll see during the course that, hey, this is critically important, and this is why this is probably the first course within the whole training. So again, I hope that you guys get a lot out of it. Feel free to ask questions. You know, this is an opportunity. This is your class, you know, and this is an opportunity to get some real defined answers. I kind of like an interactive class. So if you can as you put the questions in the chat, if we can take, you know, Beth and Cedric, if we can go forth and start to ask the questions, especially when it's relative to the slide that is going for, that would really, really help, you know, and then get some of that interactiveness that, you know, help makes the class, you know, more dynamic and robust. And again, you know, starting off, thank you guys again for having me. And we'll start with this, just a very basic. Safety truly is your business, and it's protecting your way of life. So you will see again, you know, why it's so important to your business. You know, accidents, causes, you know, and the impact, you know, and safety responsibilities from both your employers and from you guys and for your employees. You know, the insurance component to it. And if you guys have never heard the word EMR, it just stands for Experience Modifier Fire Rate. And that's an insurance term that will determine how much you pay as opposed to everybody else, and then how competitive you are. And in some cases, it'll also dictate whether or not you even get an opportunity to bid on a job. So it's extremely important, you know, and we'll be discussing this later on, and making sure you have that corporate safety plan, just from a legal perspective, to make sure that you can protect yourself. So these are some of the core objectives of the course. And again, like I say, please put questions in the chat so we can address them. So why should you worry about safety? Why should you be concerned? These are some of the regulatory agencies, including when you see DOL, that's just the Department of Labor, which OSHA falls up under, workman's comp, losses. And when, you know, again, when you start seeing losses where it's lost time, you know, that can have an impact on how, you know, how profitable you are in your business. It can also have an impact with your relationships that you have with some of your partners that you may be in business with to move forward. And again, I would say, like, you know, when someone's hurt, you know, people go through various stages when they're hurt. And when they go through those various stages, especially the pain, you know, they're gonna look to see how you respond to it. And all of this should be a part of your safety plan. Because again, when people are hurt and they don't see you do anything about it, there's not a process, there's not a contingency plan to get back on it. What it does is that people go through that moment of grief, then they get angry, then they go get lawyers. And then that oftentimes, you know, is the proverbial path that people follow. And that's when your business can get really, really shaky. Next slide. Beth, next slide, please. So again, like I say, getting hurt isn't fun. And you know, these are some common reasons. You know, if you don't have healthy employees, I promise you don't have a healthy business. If you're not gonna maximize your potential. And again, like I say, the one thing you don't want is a damage to your reputation. And when that reputation gets damaged, it oftentimes, you know, affects your future earnings. And again, like I say, people are going to partner with you. People aren't going to want to work with you. People are just going to kind of stand off. And then again, it just puts you in a compromised situation. And then the other thing, the cost of the accident. And it's not just the initial cost, you know, of just paying the medical bill. There are a lot of subsequent costs, you know, that show up afterwards, that, you know, indirect costs that you may not even be aware of. Next slide. So some of those direct costs, people just look at it and say, hey, I paid the medical bill, you know, and then, you know, again, you know, a lot of that's covered under workers' comp, and those things follow you for a long time, you know, and then the payments associated afterwards, you know, indemnity payments, and then some of the indirect costs. Think about it, you know, from you guys' perspective, right? You know, and each of you can take this on your own. You know, the number of employees. What happens if, you know, you have an employee out? What happens if a supervisor gets hurt? You know, how does it impact your business? You know, what happens if you know, those indirect costs, you know, what happens when someone's hurt and you have schedule delays? How do you think your client's gonna feel about that? How do you think your business partners are gonna feel if you're sub to someone? How do you think they're gonna feel about that? And then again, going back, you know, the regulatory agencies get involved. They're gonna wouldn't want to look to see, you know, okay, you hired this person. What type of training did you provide them? Are they prepared? You know, and then if there's some type of property loss associated with it, you know, who pays for that cost to clean up? You know, and how would that impact you? And again, like I say, when things go wrong, you know, especially when there are contracts involved, the legal fees that we don't take into account. Again, like I say, unable to spend quality time with your family. And I like to concentrate on this one because when someone's hurt at work, they're also hurt at home. So the things they may do, you know, outside of work and the thing that work affords them to do, they aren't going to do it. And all of those things, if something goes wrong, you know, can definitely lead to something, you know, in some type of civil lawsuit, you know, that those costs that we don't necessarily take into account when someone gets hurt, and taking that respective time to make sure that you have the right people to do the right job and have the right training. Next slide. So again, this is what they call the iceberg effect. We see what it costs, you know, it's not just that one fixed cost that we see, you know, hey, the medical bill, you know, again, that's something that, you know, there's those costs that I listed before, the legal fees, you know, the attorneys, you know, and then the raising of the insurance costs. All of those things are feed into that part you don't see. And so, and again, in the industry, they refer to this as as the iceberg effect. So you'll be, mindfully aware. So even if you have contingency, put back, you even have to think about what would it take to get another employee? And I'm sure all of you guys know, just being in business today, how difficult, and challenging it is to find qualified people. And again, some of you may even find it even more difficult to find, people not just qualified, but that are dependable, that show up to work. And again, having to get that person back up to speed. So things, like these are things you got to take into account about the cost of, an accident or an incident when you actually have one. Next slide, please. So again, this is just doing some numbers, and this is where we start to delve in and go in, looking at claims and looking at the severity of claim, because the severity of claims do matter. And again, if you don't have like a return to work policy under the workers' comp, these things are actually going to start to cost you. And you have to be mindfully aware that, hey, when you don't have these contingencies in place, this is when things go, out of whack. Next slide, please. So why worry? And here's some common reasons, that you should worry, because like I say, the getting fun isn't hurt. Isn't getting hurt isn't fun. It's not fun for you because you lose money. It's not fun for the employee because they may not be able to work. And if you, like I say, if you have workers' comp, you might know that it doesn't pay very well. And in this current economy where we're in, you see the rising cost of inflation. And because these things are so high, people are looking to kind of recoup and get back and made whole. And see, this is when the legal issues come in. And this is where the liability comes in. As an employer, you have a obligation under OSHA 1904 to make sure that you provide training and make sure that you provide, a safe place for your employees to work. That includes not just, a clean office, making sure that the equipment, making sure that the personnel that you're working in and around, are trained and the equipment is fully operable, and making sure that there are inspections that are associated with it. Again, going back, damage to your brand, damage to your reputation. As the roll call was called today, each and every one of you should take great pride in the name and the work that you provide. And anything that goes wrong is damage to that reputation. You want to make sure that you have all of those things in place from a risk and safety standpoint to make sure that you protect the brand, protect the namesake, so you can continue to earn at a very high level. Again, like I say, you don't want anything to limit your potential, earnings. That, and again, having everything in place, making sure that you're able to deal with all the regulatory issues that are associated with is critically important. Next slide. So let's look at some of the legal issues and the liability. As a result of a safety, this is an example, as a result of a safety violation, you can be named in a lawsuit. And I'm not sure if you guys keep up with some of the things that have happened lately, like with some of the companies. I will tell you, the first thing people start to cut, when they're trying to streamline, they cut the safety portion of their operations. Maybe they don't have all the safeguards in place. Then something catastrophic happens, then you could be named in a lawsuit. And what OSHA has gone forth to do, is not just make people liable, especially some of the bigger companies as well, naming some of the project managers, superintendents, owners. And if you have a safety guy that doesn't have, the requisite credentials and skill set, those people are, they're oftentimes, liable criminally. And OSHA has recently, started to name a lot of those folks, and they've gotten sentences up to 10 years. And the thing is, if you're a small business owner or an emerging or mid-sized business owner, even even an officer in a large company, you're attached with that responsibility, to make sure that those guys are protected. And again, this falls up under Title 29, Code of Federal Regulations, 1926, 1910, making sure that, that you have all of these things in place. It's great when you have a business and you're really, really good at what you do. That's an awesome thing. But again, as you hire people, you have a responsibility as well to make sure that as they go forth and perform for you, you are taking all the necessary precautions to make sure that they can go home to their respective family. So you can be cited by enforcement agencies. You can be fined. And your company or workplace, when you're fined by these regulatory agencies, oftentimes, if it's egregious enough, if you receive a fine, they shut your company down until some of these tenants are put in place, and you can go forth to demonstrate that you have gone forth, provided the training, mitigated the risk, and then had those individuals have the core competency to execute the jobs that you've hired them for. So again, when we see this, we have to make sure, just from a standpoint, that we have it in place to protect us, against all of the legal issues and liability. Next slide, please. So these are just old stories. I worked with a gentleman, who actually was performing some work, and they were doing some trench work, and they were going down to, make a quick connection on a valve. They thought they'd be down for 30 seconds, to do it. As soon as they got in the hole, it collapsed. And when it collapsed, 3 of the guys were able to get out. The 4th person wasn't able to get out, and the 4th person died. And this guy was charged criminally, with manslaughter. So again, you hear about these things, and even as they should have had, a trench box, in the hole to make sure they safeguard. They should have had a job hazard analysis to understand what was taking place. The workers should have been advised on what took place, what could potentially happen when they were in a trench. And, I'm sure you guys see it even with guys who go around doing roofing. We see it, when guys are doing trucking, and they're on the road, and maybe, you don't go forth to do that qualified inspection, as required by the DOT. Those are things that we have to make sure, and as business owners and business leaders, to make sure that those things are in place. So again, like if someone dies, it's automatically a $500,000 fine, non-negotiable, period. That's what OSHA imposes on immediately. So again, and they're going to want to dig and find out, do you have the records? Do you have the training? They're going to see the person's resume. They're going to see what you did in preparation of doing the job via the job hazard analysis. See that you study it. And if you hadn't, then guess what? That's on you. That's where the liability is laid right there at your feet. Next slide, please. So again, you can be cited by an enforcement agency. You know, there's state level OSHAs and there's EPA, you know, and then there's a federal OSHA has this authority to get involved. And again, like I say, if you're state sponsored, you know, again, they have that, they can just come out on your site. And again, if you've never been through that process through via an OSHA inspection, they're going to separate you and your employee. They're going to ask them some questions. And then those employees are protected by the whistleblower law. So again, you can't go back and retaliate. You can't go back and ask what happened. And then, you know, again, it puts you in a compromising situation. So it's important to understand who you're hiring. It's important to understand, you know, what training that they need. So you don't put them in an area where they don't have the skill set to perform or don't understand all of the risks that's associated with it. So again, this is a very involved process. And I'll tell you, anytime that there is, you know, most times when OSHA shows up on a job, 9 times out of 10, it's an employee within your organization that's actually called them. And they're scared because they're uncomfortable maybe doing an activity or felt like, you know, you didn't put forth enough safeguards or provide enough training for them to execute the work. And again, when it happens, they usually bring their own attorney onto your site. And it's something that you can't avoid at that time, you know, because they will come with subpoenas. They will, and you're required to turn over those documents within 4 hours. So again, just being prepared, being well documented, you know, to address any of the concern before they morph into something that could potentially lead you and your company, you know, on down a road for which you may not want to go. Next slide. So again, you know, these are just companies in the past. And again, these are big, big fines. And you guys probably remember the, you know, BP when they got when the Deepwater Horizon, when they got the $87 million fine, you know, and again, this was a discounted fine when they actually got it, you know. Again, you're starting to see it more and more, just like, you know, again, you know, you're seeing it with as this world starts to change and the labor force starts to change, you know, you're starting to see more enforcement, you know, from the regulatory agencies to ensure, you know, that we can curb those numbers. And I will tell you, just being in the region and the southern United States, we're probably the most heavily fined region in the entire United States, you know, because of the lack of training, you know. And again, I will say this respectfully, you know, a lot of times we like to look at cheap labor, and cheap may not always be cheap in the long run, especially when you're caught. And again, like I say, we have to make sure that we've done our part, you know, in protecting, you know, our way of life, our company, our reputation, our future earnings. So next slide, please. So again, these regulatory agencies can order a cease and desist. And the one thing you don't want, and we will talk about that, how it affects those mod rates, you don't want to get shut down. Because think about it. If you were a contractor on a job, and even if you're a sub to a major prime, think about it. If they came out and they stopped your work, how do you think that prime would feel about it? How do you think that client would feel? And again, when they issue a cease and desist order, you can't move forward until, you rectify the situation. How do you think your client would feel? How do you think that prime's gonna feel? And there are other agencies, from the EPA on down to even local agencies with competent jurisdiction can also issue it, to include municipalities and their respective, regulatory inspectors. Again, we gotta make sure that we have, great programs in place in order to avoid these type of major mishaps. And again, a lot of time we don't like to study these mishaps because again, I would say, these are the real blind spots for most organizations that they don't see until something comes down. And then they realize they don't have a contingency plan to actually deal with them. And it's kind of too late to call somebody like me, it's one of those things that is going to be a lot of pain, up front, as far as, kind of rectifying the situation rather than making the qualified investment up front. Next slide. So again, how can you protect yourself? And I would ask all of you guys, and just think about this as we talk. And again, if we have questions afterwards, what's your true investment and, what's your true safety budget? And where is it allocated? Do you have a program? And mind you, there's a difference between a program and a plan. A program is a living document that's practiced with, review, training, and then making sure that those individuals have a level of retention and they continue to grow. And then as things start to change, ask yourself, what policies do you have as related to safety? How do you go about starting your work? Do you just show up and get going? Or do you take, time in order to kind of understand what you're doing? And then what about the people? Who are you hiring? What's their skill set? And then how are you validating that skill set? Are you validating it through training? Are you evaluating it through observation? Are you documenting it? What are you doing? What are you doing to protect that? And then going back to your equipment. And we've all seen equipment on site, where it probably wasn't properly maintained. And you're waiting for something to happen, under those same OSHA policies, there are special requirements that you have to actually have in order to make sure that you have that right equipment and not putting people in harm's way. So again, having these things really makes a difference. And these are some of the basic tenets that feed into, whether you're going to get, a lower insurance rate, whether you're going to get that experienced mod rate that'll actually help you, be more profitable and, reduce your overhead so you can actually pocket a lot of that money that's associated with it. It has to be an investment into your business, and not just the hard tangible items. There has to be some administrative stuff that's associated with it. There has, and there has to be some level of consistency, even if you get to ISO standards, making sure that you can produce a quality product with quality people and come out with quality results. So next slide, please.
Excuse me, Thomas, before we go to the next slide, I see a question in the chat.
Go right ahead, sir.
It came from Mr. Lamont Harris
Mhm.
of Harris and Associates. He asked a question: does your company have to be a particular size to incorporate OSHA regulations, especially if you are not required to have workers' comp?
So that's a great question that people oftentimes, get confused. So all companies with 10 or more employees are required to do what they call a OSHA 300, right? But with that OSHA 300, you do a reporting. That reporting comes from, you report to the Department of Labor from February 1st through April 30th, just showing, the number of injuries you have, and what you've done as far as training. So again, you may not be able to, if you're like a husband and wife, a family business, you may not be required to have workers' comp. It's not really a requirement if you don't have it. But think about it. What happens when that individual gets hurt? Because I will promise you, having done this for nearly 30 years, when you go to the doctor, the first question out of the doctor's mouth is, how did you get hurt? And when you say at work, immediately your personal doctor is going to relinquish that to a work comp doctor. That kind of starts the cascade of getting workers' comp in whatever state you're in involved. Because again, without that workers' comp, and like I say, you don't have to have it, your husband and wife, you're working at risk, so to speak. So again, who pays for those medical bills? Who pays for those losses? So again, you might think, hey, I'm getting away and I'm cutting corners, but I will tell you also, and I'm sure you'll learn more about this in the class is coming. If you don't have workers' comp, there are some clients you can't do work with. So again, if you want to work at risk, that's certainly your choice. But again, understanding, how big of a risk that could be, and how it may affect you. Did that answer your question for whoever answered the question?
Yeah, it did sort of. So I wasn't insinuating that I didn't understand the importance of having workers' comp. I was just wondering, was there a certain requirement that your company have to be a certain size? Because I'm very familiar with OSHA regulations because I came from the steel foundry. So that's highly regulated. So, but I was just, as a construction company, small, with only a few employees, full-time that is. That's what I wanted to know.
So let me ask you something. Are all of these employees relatives?
Yes.
Okay. And you sure they won't take you to court?
No, I'm not. No, absolutely. I would hope they would. But I understand. Yeah, I do understand.
So the only thing I can do is kind of set it up. And like I say, and I've seen cases where there have been, children and stepchildren that worked for, construction companies and they got hurt. And guess what? They went after their step parent and in some cases parents' company. Because again, if you get hurt catastrophically, or even if you get, hurt on a minor letter, your life has changed. And again, your job as a owner is to help make sure that you insulate yourself. And then again, you may not necessarily be able to get, an opportunity to work with some, especially municipal clients, without demonstrating that you have a level of workman's comp. So don't limit yourself. I would go back and even after this class, it's going to teach you a whole lot, not just this portion of the class, the entire program that's set up before you. It's going to get you to start thinking more in depth of how you run your business, not just how you perform work, and understand, where some of the blind spots may be and how you can, take appropriate actions so you can be more viable and look more attractive, to future clients.
That's a good point, Thomas. It just makes me think about at one point, I used to work for Archer Daniels Midland. And, we used to have to do all the OSHA trainings, just every month I had to do something with OSHA because of the nature of what we did. And unfortunately, I actually seen a person uh, get mangled and they perished in a 30-inch screw auger. A contractor, contractors was there. You know how some contractors just want to get the job done. And that facility, we had a lot of dangerous equipment. And if you're not familiar with lockout, tag out,
Right.
and you lock out, let's say, the wrong thing or don't know what you're locking out, they was working on one of those augers and they went and locked out the wrong auger. And somebody went by and just hit the start button. And I mean, I actually seen that with my own two eyes, and that, I was always safe, but that changed my perspective. I used to always carry 2 locks. I went to carrying 5 to lock out like whatever I was locking out, coming to that. I mean, I would lock out 3 or 4 different ways to keep anybody from starting anything, period. And it just made me think about my time that I spent there and the importance of, and we took a big fine. I mean, the fine was humongous. We all had to change our work schedule, come in at, I think at 5 a.m., watch videos every Friday, and just reiterate safety, safety, safety. And we got some surprise inspections from OSHA at the facility. So it's very important. I thank you. This is some great information, y'all. Yeah, this is some great information.
And I promise you, if they start inspections on you, I promise you it won't be the last one. And they're just waiting for you to because they want to see a change in what you do. And again, when people get themselves in those compromising situations, I mean, in my career, I've literally seen hundreds of people have to fold their company and go under. And I will promise you, if someone gets hurt, his or her family is not gonna rest. And I mean, let's be honest. You guys listen to the radio. You guys watch the television. There are attorneys that will take that case, in a heartbeat. And if you don't have the documentation, you don't have all of those things in place, to show that you've done your due diligence, you could find yourself in a bad situation. And I'll say this, and people say, well, it can't happen to me because I'm a program manager, I'm a construction manager. Okay. I've seen those situations even in the office, where someone slips and falls in the office. And then they find themselves facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because they got their hip broken. And they can't enjoy some of the things like skiing and walking and running, and even enjoying the stuff of playing with their kids or grandkids. So again, this is the real blind spot. And like I say, I'm glad we always do this module first, so you can understand. It's great to go out there and be great at what you do and make money, but you better understand where some of the landmines are and some of the huge bear traps are that can put you down. And like I say, I've seen people hire folks and they get hurt the first day, the first hour. And they're people that are, like I say, because they just stick them out of a job and they don't have training, and they're people who go around, looking for those opportunities to take advantage. So again, understanding the policies, having the training, having the program, understanding the people, and having the equipment everybody can talk a good game until, it hits the ground and things start to roll. Any more on that? If not, next slide, please. But great question. So understanding accidents, and as a business owner, ask yourself these two questions. It's most accidents are predicated behind these two things. Is it an unsafe condition? Like you described, Cedric, unsafe condition. There's an auger there that will rip you apart if you get close to it? Or is it an unsafe act? Somebody did not follow the lockout tagout, procedure. The unsafe condition, you have to do everything possible in order to make sure that those things, don't happen. And again, no matter what the setting you're working in, you have to make sure that you do your due diligence to make sure that you isolate those things. And I would even take it a little farther, for those that don't just do it in your business, do it at home as well. There's some things we wouldn't, that we may take chances at home. If you got an unsafe ladder or something on the job, throw it away, get rid of it, replace it. Same thing. If you go to try to change a light bulb in a office chair and then you fall, because people get hurt at home as well. And then like I say, you have to continue to preach and make sure people aren't committing unsafe acts, because those same folks will limp on your job and say they got hurt on your job. Then who pays for it? You pay for it. Then who pays for it? Because that person's lost, and that lost productivity takes away from your bottom line. And don't think people aren't watching. Don't think the client isn't watching. Don't think if you're a sub, don't think the prime isn't watching. If you're not keeping up, you're not doing anybody any favors. The reason they have schedules. And that's why, the safety aspect is very tied into that, to make sure you can meet those qualifying demands. Next slide, please. So again, unsafe conditions, they're easy to correct and very cost effective. Ask yourself, and these are things that come part of your, if you have a safety program. Are you doing audits? Are you doing safety audits? Are you doing inspections? Do you have scheduled maintenance on your equipment? And what does that entail? Are you encouraging employees to report things that are unsafe, or conditions that, are unsafe or threatening? You have good housekeeping. Are you assigning, and this is probably one of the more important ones, and I'm sure all of you have heard this at some time or another. I even heard it earlier today. Are we assigning competent supervisors and foremen and leaders? Some people are like, get it done at all costs. Forget the safety aspect of it. We got to get this done. And usually that's when something happens. So, what are you doing to look at, the unsafe conditions in a very comprehensive manner? So, next slide, please. Anybody got any questions on that? If not, let's talk about the unsafe acts. This is under or untrained workers on your team. I get it. It's tough to find good folks. And if you find good folks, they're going to want good money. But sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth making that investment. Again, like I say, cheap isn't always cheap in the end when you look at the totality of the cost. and how it could eat away at your bottom line. You know, the most difficult to address, and I will just tell you, just working with HR, you know, with a lot of company, you know, if somebody has the wrong behavior, ask yourself, why do you want them on your job? If they're not, they have a behavior that's not in line, and they're not totally, you know, committed to the entire process, then again, why would you want those individuals on your job? So again, those are things that you have to continue to ask yourself, you know, throughout the process, right? And in doing so, go back to, yeah. So again, like I say, how do you ensure that you got a culture? How do you, you know, you ensure that you're developing and implementing some best practices? What are you doing as far as training and the investments in your business? A lot of us like to invest in assets, the trucks, the tools, you know, the laptops. Well, how do you invest in your employee, which is probably your biggest asset? These are things that you need to kind of take into consideration. You know, it's good till it's not good, until things go wrong. And then you got to navigate your way rather than having a plan to get back on. It's not just calling the insurance company. The insurance company will love to do it, but they're going to raise your premium when they do it. So next slide, please. So again, talking about that safety culture, establishing accountability, you know, and again, how do you establish the accountability? You know, making sure that, hey, there are protocols in place. And again, making sure that you're not sending people out that are not ready to perform, you know, and ready to perform means everything from having the right equipment on site, so you don't have to go back to the warehouse or to a home improvement shop or to get equipment or anything that you may have gotten. You know, define everybody's responsibility. Everybody think it's the safety guy's responsibility to be safe. Hey man, you're responsible for your own safety. And you got to make sure not just responsible for your safety, but the people that are around you. And when someone's doing something, I'm sure all of you seen some of the pictures where you see guys in Tyvek suits and with respirators, and they're performing work. Then you see a guy leaning over their shoulder, and he said, "I'm not doing the work," but he doesn't have on anything. You got to know what's going on around you. You know, there could be something released that could cause you some level of exposure. That's why you're seeing these cases, you know, from 30, 40, 50 years ago with mesothelioma. Guys working in spaces, they weren't necessary. Some of them weren't even doing the work. They were just working next to them and they got exposure. And now they're suffering as a result. And again, establish a program. You know, not just a bunch of paper where you get somebody to write you a plan. Have them come back and do the training. You know, just like you're training yourself now, so you can be more successful down the road by having some of this knowledge, you know, provided to you through this entire program. And invest in your people. Well, I believe when you invest in your people, they see it, they take pride, and it becomes contagious. And that's why it's important to lead with compassion, understanding that, hey, these are people too. When you show people that you care, they'll start caring about you. You show people you don't care, they're not going to care about you or your equipment or anything, and then that'll be damage to your reputation. Next slide. So again, establishing accountabilities. How are you evaluating your employees? You know, just don't use the simple metric. They showed up on time. What kind of job did they do? What's the difference between somebody being, good, better, or great? What metrics are you using? Are they doing it correctly? Did they have any accidents, over the period of time? Do you have specific job description? Because I promise you, if you're ever on any type of inspection from a regulatory agency where somebody gets hurt, they're gonna ask, the first thing the case nurse is gonna ask you for, provide me with a job description. And then some of the general safety policies and procedures as established by your safety department. And even if you don't have a safety department, if you own a business, you're the safety person. So keep that in mind, because that's whose shoulder it truly resides with. Next question, next slide. So again, chargeback systems, making sure that all of these things, how are you going back to assess these things? Safety goals. How are you measuring your safety goals? How do you know if people say, well, we're safe. And then one thing I'll say, prove it. Just don't say it, prove it. What does that mean? Can't prove it, doesn't mean anything. Equipment damage, when things get damaged, show me your schedule for maintenance, that stuff. So it doesn't make it to a bad situation or breakdown. Lost time, show me your accident rates. And there's a pyramid called Heimrich pyramid, that says that when we look over the little things, ultimately leads to the bigger thing. The pyramid gets small, and it usually results in like a death or somebody being catastrophically injured. Again, where are you at with workers' comp? And this is going to lead into the second part of our discussion, later, about that workers' comp. So remember that loss ratio, including accident rates, because all those things matter. All those things factor into it. And ask yourself, as far as safety activity, when's the last time you had a safety meeting? And what was the topic? And was that topic related to the work that you do? When's the last time you inspected a job for safety? And for those of you that hadn't heard these acronyms, PPE, what personal protective equipment have you provided? That's PPE. PTP, how do you document the pre-task planning? All questions to make sure that there's a level of accountability. All of these things of which, if you had them, would help lower your insurance rate. Next slide. So again, defining responsibilities for employees, including, okay, if you see a hazard, what's the process for fixing it? What's the process for letting someone know? What about good housekeeping? All of you gone places and things are all mangled and out of order. If you show me something that's out of order, where there's good housekeeping, I'll show you an accident waiting to happen. It may not happen, but the probability goes up. And what does working safely mean? If you can't document it and show me the safeguards and assessments that you went through, what does that really mean? You see people, like even personal protective equipment, you see people wearing hard hats backwards. It may look cool, but it doesn't work that way. Right? And then, making the most of safety training like this, it's great when there are questions, and even when they're related to your real life situation, because like I say, once they happen, it's no redo, it's no undo. It's a recovery at that point. How do you recover? How do you put things back together? And again, it's the same way at home. If you don't take safeguards, little stuff, You got small kids and you're cooking in the kitchen, don't leave the handles hanging off the edge so they can grab them. You know, if you're at home, you know, and you don't have and if you don't have smoke detectors, you know, and you're not checking the batteries to make sure that they work, you know, then you run the risk of something happening. You know, if you're not cleaning up after yourself, you know, and you leave a slippery floor, then you fall. You know, all of these things have to be part of who you are, part of your DNA. And you say, hey man, it's a lot to do. Yeah, owning a business you take on a lot of risk. You own it all, every last bit of it. Something goes wrong, it's on you. You don't get the opportunity to assign it to someone else. You can't say it's somebody else's fault. You can't say that person was dumb or that person did a stupid thing. They did a stupid thing and was dumb. Guess what? It's because you didn't train them. You didn't make sure they had the training. You didn't make sure they were ready. Next slide. Again, you have these responsibilities to make sure that you have a plan, make sure you have orientation, make sure that person's qualified, make sure that you have a written HAZCOM, and if you bring any chemicals around them, make sure you're recording it. And then, like I say, the law reads, you must have a medical surveillance company, especially with those chemicals to include diesel fuels, gasolines, stuff. So, because those things do have benzene in it, you know, and so you got to maintain those records for 30 years after the last day of employment, or you'll still be liable. Next slide. I think this is the last one. And again, this is your responsibility providing personal protective equipment, your cost, not the employee. If you're exposing them to something, you got to pay for it. If it's something that'll crush their foot, you got to pay for the boots. And this is the regulation. You can go look it up yourself. You can just type in the number 1910.132. It will tell you. So this is something that every employer has to know. If there's a hazard, you got to protect, regardless. Next slide. So again, this is some of the tenets, like I say, making sure that you're recording, making sure that you have these special programs, depending on what trade you're in. And then some states have even deeper requirements. So again, next slide. This is a general duty clause that says that you has a duty to furnish each employee with employment, a place of employment that's free of recognized hazard, causing or likely to cause death or serious harm. More people get fined by this. This is the number one fine that OSHA issues. They find one thing wrong that could potentially cause somebody. This is the number one fine. This is where it averages about $25,000 per occurrence. And per occurrence means per employee. So if you got 10 employees exposed to it, guess what? 250,000. Non-negotiable. Next slide. So again, what does it mean? You know, it means that safety is your business, morally and ethically. You got to work to make sure you have a safe work environment. Next slide. Any questions? And I know that this is the point we're going to have a 10-minute break, and I'll try to stay on time, Beth, to make sure that we can recover some time on our next slide. But I'll stay here if anybody has any questions during the 10-minute break.
There's no question. We'll start our 10-minute break. All right. It is now 8:18. Be back at 8:28. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, my clock has 8:28. When Mr. Thomas Wilson is ready,
I'm ready. Let's go.
did I put this in the wrong place?
No,
Oh,
put it right
you
here.
said you wanted him here early, yeah.
Yeah, I want them to see it so we can.
I'm gonna have to write him down.
I mean, if they don't understand it, I mean, it could be a problem.
Everyone, these are the homework questions. Please write them down. They will do 24 hours, no later than 48, 24.
Ms. Beth, can you send these questions to us via email? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Yes, I can, but you need to write them down now because he will speak on some of these in his presentation, the next session, the next part 2. Camera on, everyone, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep giving y'all Eastern time. Who is that? Miss Robbins. Miss Central time. Any other chat question?
No, Beth, there's no questions in the chat.
Okay, so Mr. Thomas wants you guys to write these down. Look at this, because he's gonna go over the EMR. Number 1, do you actually have a safety program? Number 2, have you sat down with your insurance agent or broker? Number 3, do you know what is your experience modification rate? Acronym EMR. If you don't know, he will be discussing that soon. Number 4, do you understand the effect of having a good EMR? Mr. Wilson is on right now.
Let's go.
You ready, Thomas?
Yes, ma'am. All right, understanding EMR.
Okay.
Rates and overview. So again, during this, you're gonna learn why this is important. You're gonna learn why some businesses can get the differential advantage over others versus, yourself. And you're gonna understand, and I'll just say this right off hand, right? For clients and especially municipal agencies, this is like your credit score. It says so much about you, the type of work you do, how well you do it, how efficient you do it, And I would, and like I say, part of one of the homework questions, if you don't know what this is, and if you hadn't sat down with your broker to understand how you can improve your mod rate, you probably need to have that conversation like every year and twice a year. And then say your rates are determined by two things: the base rate assigned by the business activity. So if you're in trucking, guess what? There's a SIC number just for trucking. If you're in, framing, or you're in electrical, there's a base rate for that. And with that base rate, based on how you perform, that determine, where you go up or down, and then that's the extent of losses you have. One of them you can control, and one you can't. The first one you can't, because it's just a base rate. So again, if you have a base EMR, everybody starts out, go to the next slide, please. Everybody starts out with a base rate, and that EMR rate, the calculate, and then, like I say, these are some of the key concepts: the calculations and limit, the base rate, the financial impacts of high rates, and best ways to control those rates. So again, we're going to talk about those things. We're going to make sure you got a good basic understanding, so you can start to ask some questions and find out how you can put more money in your pocket. And then when you have a really low EMR, this is something that you can parade around, and that will attract clients like no other business, like nobody's business. This tells clients, who you are, even before you even respond to any proposal. So when you see this and they ask for it and you understand where you are, you're in good shape. Next slide. So again, what your company pays as a premium, is a result of four things: type of work performed, frequency of the claim, severity of the claim, and man hours. That's why when you were stating that you don't have workers' comp, you're not required, this is why this will potentially hurt you, if you don't understand, and that helps calculate your workers' comp rate. Next slide. So again, labor hours time mod rate time base rate. This, those three items, 1 + 1 does equal 3. And we'll learn that a little bit farther. Next slide. Click. So again, like I say, the risk class base rate. Click again. These are all things. And do you have an accident fund? Most people probably don't. Click again. Plus the medical aid, supplemental pension. Again, like I say, stay at work. Like I say, these are things that again, like I say, risk class based work. Next slide. And if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat, and we can discuss. So again, those classes, you've seen, if you guys don't know what the North American Industry Code, everybody's assigned a North American Industry Code, whether you utilize it or you're not. This is based on, if you what industry, and they have construction, they have consulting, everybody has a class, and then you pay premiums that are based on that particular class, right? But again, those premiums will go up based on the severity of if you have accident, which ultimately determines your actual rates. Next slide. So again, this is basic EMR at its basic level. If you take nothing away from this right here, if you take nothing away from this, and I'm going to explain this, right? Make sure you understand this slide. So if someone has a good rate is lower than 1.0. mind you, if you have just a base rate, a 1 point EMR, that means you're right there in the middle, right? If you have super low claims, and this is where I was going back, where you saw like the industry code. So let's say, and what they do is benchmark you against other companies. If you're a construction company with 20 folks, and they say those 20 folks, no matter where you are in the country, those 20 folks have an average of 2 injuries a year. If you have above those 2 injuries, then you're gonna have a mod rate that goes up. If you have less than those, and I'm just using the 2 as an example. So again, if you have less than, it's gonna go down. So again, when you take that number, right? Let's say if you have that base rate, let's say and you got a really good contract, a good $5 million contract, right? And your insurance rate, for that contract is $100,000, right? With that, if you have a mod rate that's 1.0, you multiply the 1.0 times the 100,000, right? Again, if you multiply that 100,000, that's gonna be your premium. This is kind of cutting to the short of it. However, if your mod rate is a 1.50, which tells folks, man, y'all got problems, you probably ain't got no safety plan, you probably ain't got no protocol, people running wild. So when the insurance company looks at it, given that base rate is gonna be $100,000, you gotta multiply that by 1.5. So your rate will be $150,000. Conversely, if you have less claim and you have a mod rate of a 0.5, you'll multiply that 0.5 times the 100,000, and your rate will be 50,000. So if we were doing like line items and comparing, the people that have the lower mod rate, guess what? They can go down, and this is how people win bids, right? They can go down and they can go for and charge a little less for labor in order to get a lower bid. So they didn't cheat. A lot of people think they did cheat, but they didn't. But if you start looking at things, labor, materials, if everything else is equal and their insurance cost is lower, 9 times out of 10, if it's a low bid, who do you think is going to win the bid? People with the low bid. And because yours is so high, and this is what this number tells you, right? If yours is the 150 and you're paying a lot more, in order to make your bid competitive, you got to try to find cheaper material. You got to try to find cheaper labor. You guys get the picture on that? So this is why that number is extremely important, and making sure that you have some of those safeguards in place. So if you get nothing more out of this entire training, make sure you understand that mod rate. And then this is why I say, talk to your insurance agent based on what industry you're in. Because based on the industry you're in, you can find out what other people are doing for best practices. Or you could call somebody like me to help you with it. But again, it's one of those things you better start. If you, like I say, the bigger your company grows, the bigger that premium is going to be. And you could wind up saving an abundance amount of money, which makes you more attractive, which makes you more marketable, which makes you look well. I promise you, you gotta understand this number. This is how some of the bigger companies and the more progressive companies take advantage of those that don't understand. This is a true blind spot for them. So please, 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 at all costs, if you need to take a snapshot of it, make sure you understand that, and then understand your industry code and understand how you can put these things in and get some big savings. And then those bigger companies, those more progressive companies, understand that having a safety program pays for itself time and time again. All right? Next slide. So again, looking at that experience modification rate, these are things, like I say, how it's calculated, the number of man hours you have, right? Man hours mean like if you have 10 employees, right? You give them 200 it's an equation. You give them 2 weeks off of a year. That means on average they're working 2,000 hours a year, right? So again, with those 10 employees, then you divide it by the frequency, the number of injuries that you have. That's gonna help determine your frequency rate. Then you take the cost of each claim and take the claim and say, what is the cost? So if you have 5 claims, right? And they were 10,000, 50,000, what is the average number of claims? Those are things that go into factoring your mod rate. So a thing is, you say, well, I got people that cut their fingers all the time. Well, my question is, why don't you have a glove policy? A mandatory glove policy with a cut with a particular cut rate if you're dealing in certain industry. Those things, by putting them in your safety plan and then requirement as policy for those individuals to wear, will help cut your severity down. It may not cut your frequency down, but it'll cut your severity, which is your cost, which factors into it, which when they benchmark it, make sure that you're lower than everybody else so you can get that lower mod rate. Next slide. So again, when does a claim affect the EMR? It says an employer's experience mod rate is a simple period of time with the labor hours, the cost that are captured in the calculation. You gotta make sure that your cost is lower than everybody else. That's why it's critical to make sure that you have that engagement, that conversation with your broker, with your agent. Don't just let him or her sell you a policy without understanding, hey, how could I make it better? It's no different than when you buy a car, right? You buy a car, they're gonna ask you some basic question, or buy a house. Buy a house, they're gonna ask you, do you have an alarm on your house? Do you have a swimming pool? Do you have a dog? And based on how you answer those things, it's gonna go up. But on a car, hey, do you have a passive alarm on a car? Do you have anti-lock brakes? Do you have airbags? All those things are gonna help lower the severity, which ultimately helps lower your premium. It's the same thing in construction. When you have those policies in place, this enables you to better understand how you can stop the severity, get the lower cost, then ultimately be more competitive with that lower EMR. Next slide. So again, just looking at it, it takes about 3 years once somebody has an injury for that thing to fall off. In some cases, if it's really severe, it takes 5 years. So if you get it, it's gonna spike up. And when it spikes up, they use a 3-year average in order to bring it down. So, if you have something, a big claim, and it spikes up, you got to work on that. And this is why when people call me, they ask for safety plans, safety programs, and so forth, looking at how can we drive this down? Because again, seeing the cost of what some of the premiums are, these things kind of pay for themselves. And like I say, those emerging companies, now those progressive companies understand this. And so they make the investment. And again, like we talked about, making the investment in your business, making the investment in your people to make sure that you can keep these things at a minimum. Next slide. So again, this is just an employer's experience period is simply the period of time in which the labor hour, the claim, that's why you should be capturing all of the hours. And you can use HR, payroll, or whatever to kind of capture the hours, and then and like anything else, whether it's if it's your insurance agent, you got to go in there armed and knowledgeable about the subject in order for them to have a defining conversation to help drive. And if they're not doing it, and whether it's your relative or whomever, somebody you know for 40 years, here's what I say. They gotta earn your business, just like you're earning business. If you don't need someone that's not an advocate for you to help drive down these costs to help make you more profitable. So again, you got to put yourself in a situation where you're asking these questions, and when you ask these questions, be knowledgeable about it, and be that advocate for yourself, so they can help you. And if they're not, then I assure you, go find somebody else, because there are people that will help and will get you, in a place where your business can be fiscally responsible, for all of the decisions that you're making. Next slide, please. So again, like I say, the rates, it takes time. Like if they happened a couple of years ago, it's going to take some time to get those things out. So they always look backwards at what you've done in order to project what you have. Next slide. So these are just, this is what it'll kind of look like if your agent pulls it up, and this is what they call like a loss run report. So again, and if you feel like they're not doing you well, hopefully this class, and you guys can come back and ask some of the questions. Hey, this is what I got from them. This is what they showed me. And then we can sit down and have as one of the follow-ups, as Beth mentioned and as Cedric mentioned, that we can start to have that real life conversation to start changing, the dynamics of what's going on. Next slide. So again, like I say, the impacts, this is where the impacts, like I say, just with the full-time employees, the company with a profit margin, hey, and then that EMR of a 130, I think that's misspelled there, a 130, this is how that actually changes. You must find additional revenue to offset some of those findings. We gotta see our blind spots in this situation in order to make sure we can offset these premium, and then make sure that we're meeting our profit margin. And you guys are the stewards over that process. And just because you don't recognize it or just hadn't been engaged in it, doesn't mean you gotta make sure that whomever you're dealing with is giving you, accurate prices, and making sure they're doing everything you can to make sure that they drive down rates to make you more competitive, and then creating an EMR that makes you really attractive. Next slide. So again, what's controlling rates? Hey, safety, safety, safety. If you have no claims, you have nothing to worry about. And keep on salary, impacts, discount, keep claims and medical. Like I say, if somebody has to go to the doctor, don't just say go to the doctor, send them, have a process, a standard of care. And then if they're hurt, have some modified duty, with reasonable basis. Because when people are sitting home drawing on insurance, guess what? You say the insurance is paying. No, you're gonna pay it. You're gonna pay it until they recoup their money. So again, that is the only interest that don't lose money. And like I say, insist on immediate reporting, okay, when something happens, even if it's something that almost happened. So you can go out with your team or your managers and decide, hey, what we need to fix, what we need to change in order to make sure that these things don't happen. And then be able to show that documentation and that program to your broker to help drive down, so they can give you some of those respective discounts like they would if you had like analog brakes, or if you had an airbag or something like that. Next slide. So again, all those things that we talked about are lagging indicators. Lagging means that that's something that's already happened. When somebody sits home for 100 days collecting unemployment, workers' comp, man, that ain't good. And then if it's a recordable, meaning it's something that's severe enough that first aid you have to go see a doctor, That's not good. And like I say, and then all those things factor into that experience modification rate, and drives it up. That's not good. But you need to have leading indicators. Going back to having that program, predictors of the future. Hey, we're not going to have as many injuries. You know why? Because we got a new employee orientation. We're not going to have it because we got training for all of our respective trades. And we're not going to have it because we got job descriptions for every job and nobody's working out a classification. Things like that to help drive down. Those are leading indicators and they'll show up and then you'll be able to illustrate them when you do get those loss run reports from the insurance company. Next slide. So advantages of leading indicators, performance indicators, they show poor, unacceptable. You're measuring, you're auditing it. It focuses on management, not the end result. And it not only measures our injury, it prevents the strengthen, and by strengthening areas of weaknesses in our safety process and how we do business. Next slide. So again, these are some of the impact. Training conducted, planned work, the number of people that has been trained prior to the start of the work. Just attending training doesn't guarantee workers learn where they work. You need to measure it. You need to create a test, a quiz afterwards. And you know what? In order to motivate people, give them an incentive, for those that have performed and studied well, whether it's a gift card or whatever it is, make sure, and you don't want them hiding stuff, but for those that tested well, I don't believe in giving people stuff for protecting themselves. But if you have tests for all the training and they score well and they're your peak performers, give them something, some recognition, even if it's a certificate, just recognizing them for what they've done. Next slide. So, making those leading indicators work again, what gets measured gets done. And that's something that's, is always work. And then, like I said, this is just a simple little exercise. How many of us step on a scale to measure our weight? How many of us look at our car speedometer to see how fast we're driving? And then you ask yourself, when you step on that scale, are you losing weight? And this is just being honest with yourself. And as the business owner or leader, are you losing weight? Are you going too fast? Is not what gets measured, gets done, but rather it's what gets consequences that gets done. If you keep going fast, eventually you're gonna probably, inherit a ticket or something. So this stuff plays hand in hand. Next slide. So again, which is easier? Driving millions of dollars in additional sale or paying attention to your worker comp claim? So next slide. And these are questions that we got to ask ourselves. I'm a firm believer money saved is money earned. And with that, hey, I'll open it up for questions if you should have any, and we could go from there.
Any
If you have any
questions?
questions, please put them in the chat. We are monitoring the chat, or you can feel free to unmute and ask the question.
This is the end of our presentation. Once we answer your questions, so make sure that if you have any questions, ask. I will have this presentation, the slides, what we are going to do, all the sessions, we will compile the presentations and put them in one big binder that we will send to you with your certificate of completion. And that way it could be a reference guide to have on your shelf. I must say that one of our clients participated in the last BEP And she made a statement that she had an accident, it was a cleaning company, and she was so happy that she was able to go to the binder because did develop a safety plan and was able to go by those actions to help the person. Otherwise, when she did not have taken, if she had not taken this class, she would not have had the safety practices at her hands reach. So she really benefited from our safety classes. One of our clients spoke and was interviewed by the DC. She said the safety was the best thing that she had gained because something happened, an incident happened. Okay. No questions. Well, here is Mr. Wilson's information. Some cell, office, email, website. You can write it down, plus I will have it. Email address is tjwilson at Ella-vation.com. You guys, taking a picture, writing it down. Great. You got it? Okay, our next class will be August the 6th, Construction Accounting and Financial Management, Mr. Josh Roper. This homework, these 4 questions from our safety are due to be emailed to Cedric. You can copy me, but Cedric will get them 24 hours because Mr. Wilson say, after this session, you should be able to answer these questions. In 24 hours, latest is 48.
If you can't answer them, you know what you got to do.
Here is our contact information. Joe Jackson's our executive director. He's not with us today. Myself, Beth Barner, my contact email, telephone number, that's an old number. And Cedric Hamilton, his email, his telephone number. You should have all of our emails because we email you the acceptance in the program and the Zoom information. I will send you another email if we change the Zoom login. Whatever it is, I will still email it to you guys. Any questions? It is 8:01 in Memphis. I finally got it right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all for joining tonight. We appreciate your time. And hopefully you receive some really good information, insight, great information.
Yes.
And thank you,
Great.
Mr. Wilson, for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, great presentation. Brought back a lot of memories for me, but great. I really enjoyed it this evening.
Okay, everyone. Good night. Mr. Cedric, you send your email question, your homework to him, and I will be sending out tomorrow. Our next class is Tuesday. Tomorrow, Friday, no later than Monday, the login for the next class, Tuesday. All right, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.